I believe in God, the being of God proved from the frame of the world. Sermon 6 of Sermons on the Apostles' Creed by Isaac Barrow. Jeremiah chapter 51 verse 15, quote, He hath made the earth by his power, he hath established the world by his wisdom, and hath stretched out the heavens by his understanding. End quote. The attentive observation of this world, or visible frame, is not only in itself a most worthy employment of our thoughts, much more noble than any of those petty cares which commonly possess or distract our minds, but, if either the example of the best men, or the great usefulness thereof, to the best purposes, can oblige us, even a considerable duty not to be neglected by us. For it is that which affords most cogent and satisfactory arguments to convince us of, and to confirm us in, the belief of that truth which is the foundation of all religion and piety, the being of one God, incomprehensibly excellent in all perfections, the maker and upholder of all things. It instructs us not only that God is, but more distinctly shows what he is, declaring his chief and peculiar attributes of wisdom, goodness, and power, superlative. It also serves to beget in our minds affections toward God, suitable to those notions, a reverent adoration of his unsearchable wisdom, an awful dread of his powerful majesty, a grateful love of his gracious benignity and goodness. To these uses we find it applied by the best men, not only by the wisest philosophers among heathens, but by the holy prophets of God, who frequently harp upon this string, and make sweetest melody thereon, exciting both in themselves and others pious thoughts and holy devotions therewith, strengthening their faith in God, advancing their reverence toward him, quickening and inflaming their love of him, magnifying his glory and praise thereby, by the consideration, I say, of those wonderful effects discernible in nature or appearing to us in this visible world. And if ever to imitate them herein were necessary, it seems to be so now, when a pretence to natural knowledge and acquaintance with these things hath been so much abused to the promoting of atheism and irreligion, when that instrument which was chiefly designed, and is of itself most apt, to bring all reasonable creatures to the knowledge and to the veneration of their Maker, hath, in a method most preposterous and unnatural, been perverted to contrary ends and effects, to the preventing and removing which abuse, as every man should contribute what he can, so let me be allowed to endeavour somewhat toward it, by representing briefly what my meditation did suggest, serving to declare that, as the prophet asserts, or implies in the words I read, even in this visible world there are manifest tokens, or footsteps, by which we may discover it to be the work or product of one being, incomprehensibly wise, powerful, and good, to whom, consequently, we must owe the highest respect and love, all possible worship and service. Of these footsteps, or signs, there be innumerably many, which, singly taken, do discover such perfections to be concerned in the production of them. The relation of several to each other do more strongly and plainly confirm the same. The connection and correspondence of all together doth still add force and evidence thereto, each attesting to the existence of those perfections, all conspiring to declare them concentrated and united in one cause and being. 1. View we first, singly, those things which are most familiar and obvious to our senses, for only some such I mean to consider, such as any man awake, and in his senses, without any study or skill more than ordinary, without being a deep philosopher or a curious virtuoso, may, with an easy attention, observe and discern. View we such objects, I say. For instance, first, those plants we every day do see, smell, and taste. Have not that number, that figure, that order, that temperament, that whole contexture and contemperation of parts we discern in them, and manifest relation to those operations they perform? Were not such organs so fashioned, and so situated, and so tempered, in all respects so fitted, some of them to the successive propagation of them, that they might in kind never fail or perish, but, in that respect, become as it were immortal, some in regard to their present nutrition and maintenance, that the individuals themselves might not, before their due period of subsistence run through, be spent or destroyed, some for shelter and defence against all sort of causes prejudicial to either of those continuances in being respectively, to omit those which serve for grace and ornament. Do not, I say, the seed most evidently respect the propagation of the kind, the root the drawing of nourishment, the nervous filaments the conveyance of that, the skin or bark the keeping altogether close and safe, the husks and shells preservation of the seed, the leaves defence of the fruit, that such a constitution of parts is admirably fit for such purposes, we cannot be so stupid as not to perceive. We cannot but observe it necessary, for that by detraction or altering any of them, we obstruct those effects. Whence, then, I inquire, could that fitness proceed? From chance or casual motions of matter? But is it not repugnant to the name and nature of chance, that anything regular or constant should arise from it? That by it causes vastly many in number and different in quality, such as are the ingredients into the frame of the least organ in a plant, should, not once, not sometimes, not often only, but always, in one continual unaltered method concur to the same end and effect, to the same useful end, to the same handsome effect? Are not confusion, disparity, deformity, unaccountable change, and variety the proper issues of chance? It is Aristotle's discourse, quote, that one or two things, end quote, saith he, quote, should happen to be in the same manner, is not unreasonable to suppose. But that all things should conspire by chance, it looks like a fiction to conceive. What is universal and perpetual cannot result from chance, end quote. Quote, we can only, end quote, saith he again, quote, with good reason assert, or suppose such causes of things as we see generally or frequently to occur, end quote. Now, did we ever observe, or ever any man, through the whole course of times, any new thing like or comparable to any of these, to spring up casually? Do we not with admiration regard, as a thing very rare and unaccountable, in other pieces of matter any gross resemblance to these, that seemeth to arise from contingent motions and occurrences of bodies? If chance hath formerly produced such things, how comes it that it doth not sometimes now produce the like? Whence becomes it for so many ages altogether impotent and idle? Is it not the same kind of cause? Hath it not the same instruments to work with, and the same materials to work upon? The truth is, as it doth not now, so it did not, it could not ever produce such effects. Such effects are plainly improper and incongruous to such a cause. Chance never writ a legible book. Chance never built a fair house. Chance never drew a neat picture. It never did any of these things, nor ever will, nor can be without absurdity supposed able to do them, which yet are works very gross and rude, very easy and feasible, as it were, in comparison to the production of a flower or a tree. It is not therefore reasonable to ascribe those things to chance. To what then, will you say? To necessity? If you do only alter the phrase. For necessary casualty, as applicable to this case, and taken without relation to some wisdom or counsel that established it, is but another name for chance. They both are but several terms denoting blindness and unadvisedness in action. Both must imply a fortuitous determination of causes, acting without design or rule. A fortuitous determination, I say, for motions of matter, not guided by art or counsel, must be in their rise fortuitous, insomuch as that according to the nature of the thing there is no repugnance, and we may easily conceive it possible that the matter might have been moved otherwise, there being no principle originally determining it to this more than to that sort of motion. And the same motions in their process must be determinate, because in their subject there is no principle whereby it can alter its course. The same effect, therefore, of this kind, if necessary, is casual as to its original, and in that respect may be said to come from chance, if casual, is necessary in the progress, and may thence be said to proceed from necessity. And although we should suppose the beginning of these causes in their action, or motion, to be eternal, it were all one, for whether now or yesterday or from eternity infers no difference, except the entangling our minds and encumbering the case with impertinent circumstances, as to our purpose, not the circumstances of the time, but the quality of the cause, being only here considerable, the same causes, abstracting from all counsel ordering them, being alike apt or inept yesterday as today, always as sometimes, from all eternity as at any set time, to produce such effects. Neither can we therefore reasonably attribute the effects we speak of to necessity, except only to such an hypothetical necessity as implies a determination from causes acting by will and understanding. Of such a necessity matter is very susceptive, being perfectly obedient to art directing it with competent force, as, on the other hand, we find it by reason and experience altogether unapt, without such direction, of itself, that is, either necessarily or contingently, to come into any regular form, or to pursue any constant course, it being, as we say, shattered into particles innumerable, different in size, shape, and motion, according to all variety more than imaginable, thence only fit in their proceedings to cross and confound each other. The determination, therefore, of such causes as these, to such ends and effects, can be only the result of wisdom, art, and counsel, which alone, accompanied with sufficient power, can digest things void of understanding into handsome order, can direct them unto fit uses, can preserve them in a constant tenor of action. These effects must therefore, I say, proceed from wisdom, and that no mean one, but such as greatly surpasses our comprehension, joined with a power equally great. For to digest bodies so very many, so very fine and subtle, so diverse in motion and tendency, that they shall never hinder or disturb one another, but always conspire to the same design, is a performance exceedingly beyond our capacity to reach how it could be contrived or accomplished. All the endeavours of our deepest skill and most laborious industry cannot arrive to the producing of any work not extremely inferior to any of these, not in comparison very simple and base. Neither can our wits serve to devise, nor our sense to direct, nor our hand to execute any work in any degree like to those. So that it was but faintly, though truly, said of him in Cicero, concerning things of this kind, quote, nature's powerful sagacity, no skill, no hand, no artist can follow by imitation, end quote. And if we have reason to acknowledge so much wisdom and power discovered in one plant, and the same consequently multiplied in so many thousands of diverse kinds, how much more may we discern them in any one animal, in all of them, the parts of whom, in unconceivable variety, in delicate minuteness, in exquisiteness of shape, position, and temper, do indeed so far exceed the other, as they appear designed to functions far more various and more noble, the enumeration of a few whereof, obvious to our sense in some one living creature, together with conjectures about their manner of operation and their use, how much industry of man hath it employed, how many volumes hath it filled, and how many more may it do, without detecting a 10,000th part of what is there most obvious and easy, without piercing near the depth of that wisdom which formed so curious a piece. So much, however, is palpably manifest, that each of these so many organs was designed and fitted on purpose to that chief use or operation we see it to perform, this of them to continue the kind, that to preserve the individuum, this to discern what is necessary, convenient, or pleasant to the creature, or what is dangerous, offensive, or destructive thereto, that to pursue or embrace, to decline or shun it, this to enjoy what is procured of good, that to remove what is hurtful or useless, or to guard from mischief and injury, that each one is furnished with such apt instruments, suitable to its particular needs, appetites, capacities, stations, is most apparent. And I must therefore here ask again, and that with more advantage, whence this could proceed, whence all these parts came to be fashioned and suited, all of them so necessary or so convenient, that none without the imperfection and the prejudice of the creature, some not without its destruction, can be wanting. Who shaped and tempered those hidden subtle springs of life, sense, imagination, memory, passion? Who impressed on them a motion so regular and so durable, which, through so many years, among so many adverse contingencies assailing it, is yet so steadily maintained? Can this, however, proceed from giddy chance or blind necessity? Could ever, of old or lately, it is all one, senseless matter jumble itself so fortunately into so wonderful postures, so that of those innumerable myriads of atoms, or small insensible bodies, which compose each of these curious engines, none should in its roving miss the way, none fail to stop and seat itself in that due place, whence exactest art would have disposed it? Could so many, so dim, so narrow marks be hit without the aim of a most piercing and unerring eye, without the guidance of a most steady and immovable hand? All that grace and beauty which so delights our sense beholding it, all that correspondence and symmetry which so satisfies our mind considering it, all that virtue and energy extending to performances so great and admirable, must they be ascribed to causes of no worth, and supposed done to no purpose? That eye which reaches the very stars, and in a moment renders all the world, as it were, present to the creature that useth it, that ear which perceives the least stirring of the air about it, and so subtly distinguishes the smallest differences in its motion, that tongue which so readily is composed to imitate so many petty diversities of tune, those other organs which are affected by the least breath or vapour, by the least tang or savour, so that it by them can both perceive the presence and distinguish the quality of whatever is near, that it may not be disappointed in missing what is beneficial, nor be surprised by the assault of what is noxious thereto. All these and many more, the defect, distemper, or dislocation of which would be disgraceful, incommodious, or destructive to the creature, all these, I say, can any man, endued with common sense or ordinary ingenuity, affirm to have proceeded from any other cause than from a wisdom and power incomprehensible? May not the most excellent pieces of human artifice, the fairest structures, the finest portraitures, the most ingenious and useful inquiries, such as we are wont most to admire and commend, with infinitely more ease, happen to exist without any contrivance or industry spent upon them? If we cannot allow those rude imitations of nature to spring up of themselves, but as soon as we espy them are ready to acknowledge them products of excellent art, though we know not the artist, nor did see him work, how much more reason is there that we should believe these works of nature, so incomparably more accurate, to proceed also from art, although invisible to us, and performing its workmanship by a secret hand? I can assure you, of those who have with greatest attention contemplated these things, and who pass for men most able to judge in the case, even those who have discovered least affection to religion, or indeed are more than suspected of an aversion from it, whose words therefore may be taken at least for impartial dictates of common sense, that even from such the irresistible force and evidence of the thing hath extorted clear and ample confessions to this purpose, that in nature nothing is performed without reason or design, but everything in the best manner and to the best end, beyond what is done in any art, is frequently asserted and assumed by Aristotle himself, as a most evident truth, that in contriving the frame of our bodies, and the same holdeth concerning the bodies of other animals, a wisdom inscrutable, in accomplishing it a power insuperable, in designing to them so much of decency and convenience, a benignity worthy of all veneration are demonstrated. Garland in several places, with language very full and express, yea, very earnest and pathetical, doth acknowledge, that who doth attentively regard a locust, or a caterpillar, or any other viler animal, shall everywhere therein discover a wonderful art and diligence, is an aphorism dropped even from the gloomy pen of Cardan, that, quote, if any man shall view thoroughly all the instruments both of generation and nutrition, and doth not perceive them to have been made and ordered to their respective offices by some mind, end quote, or intelligent agent, quote, he is to be reputed himself void of mind, end quote, or out of his wits, is the expression of another person well known among us, whom few do judge partial to this side, or suspicious of bearing a favourable prejudice to religion. Thus doth common sense from these sort of beings, whereof there be innumerable exposed daily to our observation, even singly considered, deduce the existence of a wisdom, power, and goodness unconceivably great. And there are probably divers others, stones, metals, minerals, etc., no less obvious, even here upon the earth, our place of dwelling, which, were our senses able to discern their constitution and texture, would afford matter of the same acknowledgment. 2. But if, passing from such particulars, we observe the relation of several kinds of things each to other, we shall find more reason to be convinced concerning the same excellent perfections further extending themselves. By such comparison we may easily discern that what sparks much of art in itself singly considered, declares more thereof in respect to other things, and that many things, in which separately looked upon we could perceive but small artifice, have indeed much of it in such relation, which, although seeming in themselves mean and despicable, are yet very useful and necessary to considerable purposes, in subserviency to the convenience of more noble beings. And though perhaps we cannot thoroughly penetrate the relative use and design of everything which hangs up before us in nature's shop, by reason of our incapacity or unskilfulness in her trade, yet we shall have reason, from what we can plainly discover, to collect that each piece there is a tool accommodate to some use. Is there not, for instance, a palpable relation between the frame, the temper, the natural inclinations or instincts of each animal and its element, or natural place and abode, wherein it can only live, finding therein its food, its harbour, its refuge? Is not to each faculty within, or to each sensitive organ, an object without prepared, exactly correspondent thereto, which, were it wanting, the faculty would become vain and useless, yea, sometime harmful and destructive, as reciprocally the object would import little or nothing if such a faculty were not provided and suited thereto? As, for example, what would an eye, or the visive power, signify if there were not light prepared to render things visible thereto? And how much less considerable than it is would the goodly light itself be, were all things in nature blind and incapable to discern thereby? What would the ear serve for, if the air were not suitably disposed, made neither too thick nor too thin, neither too resty nor too fleeting, but in a due consistency, and capable of moderate undulations distinguishable thereby? The like we might with the same reason inquire concerning the other senses and faculties, vital or animal, and their respective objects, which we may observe with admirable congruity respecting each other. Have not all those goodly colours and comely shapes, which in the leaves, the flowers, and the fruits of plants, I might add in gems and precious stones, yea, in all sorts of living creatures, we behold an evident respect to the sight, and the sight a no less visible reference to them? Those many kinds of pleasant fragrancy in herbs, flowers, and spices, have they not a like manifest relation to the smell, and it to them? Could all that great variety of wholesome, savoury, and delicious fruits, herbs, grains, pulses, seeds, and roots become so constantly produced, otherwise than for the purpose of feeding and sustaining living creatures with pleasure and content? Is there not a notorious correspondence between them and the organs of taste, digestion, and nutrition? Are there not appetites prompting, yea, with intolerable pain provoking each living creature to seek its proper sustenance? And doth it not find in the enjoyment hereof a pleasure and satisfaction unexpressible? Let me add, whence comes it to pass that ordinarily in nature nothing occurs noisome or troublesome to any sense, but all things wholesome and comfortable, at least innocent or inoffensive, that we may wander all about without being urged to shut our eyes, to stop our ears, our mouths, our noses, but rather invited to open all the avenues of our soul for admission of the kind entertainments nature sets before us? Doth she not everywhere present spectacles of delight, somewhat of lively picture, somewhat of gay embroidery, somewhat of elegant symmetry to our eyes, however seldom anything appears horrid or ugly to them? Where is it that we meet with noises so violent or so jarring as to offend our ears? Is not there rather provided for us, wherever we go, some kind of harmony grateful to them, not only in fields and woods the sweet chirping of birds, by rivers the soft warbling of the stream, but even the rude winds whistle in a tune not unpleasant, the tossing seas yield a kind of solemn and graver melody. All the air about us, is it not only not noisome to our smell, but very comfortable and refreshing? And doth not even the dirty earth yield a wholesome and medicinal scent? So many, so plain, so exactly congruous are the relations of things here about us each to other, which surely could not otherwise come than from one admirable wisdom and power conspiring thus to adapt and connect them together, as also from an equal goodness, declared in all these things being squared so fitly for mutual benefit and convenience. These considerations are applicable to all, even to the meaner sorts of animals, which, being the only creatures capable of joy and pleasure, or liable to grief and pain, it was fit that insensible things should be disposed to serve their needs and uses, which hath been with so wonderful a care performed, that of so vast a number, among them there is none so vile or contemptible, no worm, no fly, no insect, for whose maintenance, whose defence, whose satisfaction, competent, shall I say, or abundant, provision hath not been made, both intrinsical, by a frame of organs fitting them to obtain and to enjoy what is good for them, to shun and repel what is bad, by strong appetites inciting them to search after and pursue, or to beware and decline respectively, by strange instincts enabling them to distinguish between what is fit for them to procure or embrace, to remove or avoid, and extrinsical also, by a great variety of conveniences, answerable to their several desires and needs, dispersed all about, and everywhere, as it were, offered to them, so that the holy psalmist, considering this and taking upon him to be, as it were, their chaplain, had reason to say this grace for them, quote, "The eyes of all wait upon thee, and thou givest them their meat in due season. Thou openest thine hand, and satisfiest the desire of every living thing," end quote. But especially that which, as reason enables us, so due gratitude obliges us, and prompts us especially to observe, there is an evident regard, so evident that even Pliny, a professed Epicurean, could not forbear acknowledging it, which all things bear to man, the prince of creatures visible, they being all, as on purpose, ordered to yield tribute unto him, to supply his wants, to gratify his desires, with profit and pleasure to exercise his faculties, to content, as it were, even his humour and curiosity. All things about us do minister, or at least may do so, if we would improve the natural instruments and the opportunities afforded us, to our preservation, ease, or delight. The hidden bowels of the earth yield us treasures of metals and minerals, quarries of stone and coal, so necessary, so serviceable to divers good uses, that we could not commodiously be without them. The vilest and most common stones we tread on, even in that we tread on them, are useful, and serve to many good purposes beside. The surface of the earth, how is it bespread all over, as a table well furnished, with variety of delicate fruits, herbs, and grains, to nourish our bodies, to please our tastes, to cheer our spirits, to cure our diseases. How many fragrant and beautiful flowers offer themselves for the comfort of our smell and the delight of our sight. Neither can our ears complain, since every wood breeds a choir of natural musicians, ready to entertain them with easy and unaffected harmony. The woods, I say, which also adorned with stately trees, afford us a pleasant view and a refreshing shade, shelter from weather and sun, fuel for our fires, materials for our houses and our shipping, with divers other needful utensils. Even the barren mountains send us down fresh streams of water, so necessary for the support of our lives, so profitable for the fructification of our grounds, so commodious for conveyance of our wares, and maintaining intercourse among us. Yea, the wide seas are not altogether unprofitable wastes, but freely yield us, without our tillage, many rich harvests, transmitting our commerce and traffic, furnishing our tables with stores of dainty fish, supplying the bottles of heaven with waters to refresh the earth, being inexhaustible cisterns, from whence our rivers and fountains are derived. The very rude and boisterous winds themselves fulfill God's word, which once commanded all things to be good, and approved them to be so, by yielding manifold services to us, in brushing and cleansing the air for our health, in driving forward our ships, which, without their friendly help, could not stir, in gathering together, in scattering, in spreading abroad the clouds, those paths of God, which, quote, drop fatness, end quote, upon our fields and pastures. As for our living subjects, all the inferior sorts of animals, it is hardly possible to reckon the manifold benefits we receive from them. How many ways they supply our needs with pleasant food and convenient clothing, how they ease our labor, how they promote even our recreation and sport. Thus have all things upon this earth, as is fit and seemly they should have, by the wise and gracious disposal of the great Creator, a reference to the benefit of its noblest inhabitant, most worthy and most able to use them. Many of them have an immediate reference to man, as necessary to his being, or conducible to his well-being, being fitted thereto, to his hand, without his care, skill, or labour. Others a reference to him, more mediate indeed, yet as reasonable to suppose. I mean such things whose usefulness doth in part depend upon the exercise of our reason, and the instruments subservient thereto. For what is useful by the help of reason doth as plainly refer to the benefit of a thing naturally endowed with that faculty, as what is agreeable to sense refers to a thing merely sensitive. We may therefore, for instance, as reasonably suppose that iron was designed for our use, though first we be put to dig for it, then must employ many arts and much pains before it become fit for our use, as that the stones were therefore made, which lie open to our view, and which without any preparation we easily apply to the pavement of our streets, or the raising of our fences. Also, the grain we sow in our grounds, or the trees which we plant in our orchards, we have reason to conceive as well provided for us as those plants which grow wildly and spontaneously, for that sufficient means are bestowed on us of compassing such ends, and rendering those things useful to us, a reason able to contrive what is necessary in order thereto, and a hand ready to execute, it being also reasonable that something should be left for the improvement of our reason, and employment of our industry, lest our noblest powers should languish and decay by sloth or want of fit exercise. Well, then, is it to a fortuitous necessity, or a necessary chance, that we owe all these choice accommodations and preeminences of nature? Must we bless and worship fortune for all this? Did she so especially love us and tender our good? Was she so indulgent toward us, so provident for us in so many things, in everything, making us the scope of all her workings and motions here about us? Must we change style and say, Fortune pours down blessings on our heads, Fortune crowns us with loving kindness, Fortune daily loads us with her benefits? Shall we not only esteem these good things her gifts, but even acknowledge ourselves her offsprings, and reverence her as our mother, disclaiming so noble a parent as wisdom omnipotent, disowning so worthy a benefactor as sovereign goodness? O brutish degeneracy! O hellish depravedness of mind! Are we not only wretchedly blind and stupid, if we are not able to discern so clear beams of wisdom shining through so many perspicuous correspondences, if we cannot trace the divine power by footsteps so express and remarkable, if we cannot read so legible characters of transcendent goodness, but extremely unworthy and ungrateful, if we are not ready to acknowledge, and with hearty thankfulness to celebrate all these excellent perfections, by which all these things have been so ordered as to conspire and cooperate for our benefit. Methinks the very perception of so much good, the continual enjoyment of so many accommodations, the frequent satisfaction of so many senses and appetites, should put us in so good humour that when we feel our hearts replenished with food and gladness, when we so delightfully relish nature's dainties, when we with pleasure view this fair scene of things, when our ears are ravished with harmonious sounds, when our spirits are exhilarated with those natural perfumes shed about our gardens, our woods, and our fields, we should not be able to forbear devoutly crying out with the psalmist, quote, O Lord, how manifold are thy works! In wisdom hast thou made them all. The earth is full of thy riches. The earth, O Lord, is full of thy mercy and bounty. Lord, what is man that thou art so mindful of him? Or the Son of Man that thou makest such account of him? That thou hast made him to have dominion over the works of thy hands, and hast put all things under his feet. End quote. Under his feet. And such, in a manner, according to proper and direct meaning, are all those things which we have as yet touched upon. So many arguments of the divinity, even looking downwards, as it were, if we do not so look rather like beasts than men, we may upon this little spot of our habitation perceive. But if, employing our peculiar advantage, we lift up our eyes and minds towards heaven, there, in a larger volume, and in a brighter character, we shall behold the testimonies of perfection and majesty stupendous described. As our eyes are dazzled with the radiant light coming thence, so must the vast amplitude, the stately beauty, the decent order, the steady course, the beneficial efficacy of those glorious lamps astonish our minds, fixing their attention upon them. He that shall, I say, consider with what precise regularity and what perfect constancy those, beyond our imagination, vast bodies perform their rapid motions, what pleasure, comfort, and advantage their light and heat do yield us, how their kindly influences conduce to the general preservation of all things here below, impregnating the womb of this cold and dull lump of earth with various sorts of life, with strange degrees of activity, how necessary, or how convenient at least, the certain recourses of seasons made by them are, how can he but wonder, and wondering adore that transcendency of beneficent wisdom and power, which first disposed them into, which still preserves them in, such a state and order, that all of them should be so regulated, as for so many ages together, even through all memories of time, to persist in the same posture, to retain the same appearances, not to alter discernibly in magnitude, in shape, in situation, in distance each from other, but to abide fixed, as it were, in their unfixedness, and steady in their restless motions, not to vary at all sensibly in the time of their revolution, so that one year was ever observed to differ in an hour, or one day in a minute, from another. Doth it not argue a constant will directing them, and a mighty hand upholding them? It did so, Plutarch tells us, to the common apprehensions of men in ancient times, who from these observations deduced the existence and notion of a God, because, saith he, quote, they took notice that the sun, the moon, and the rest of the stars, taking their course about the earth, did constantly arise alike in their colours, equal in their brightness, in the same places, and at the same times." End quote. Reason dictated to them what the inspired psalmist sings concerning the heavenly host, that God, quote, "commanded, and they were created. He hath also established them forever and ever, by a decree that shall not pass." End quote. And surely those celestial squadrons could never be ranged in a form so proper, and march on so regularly, without the marshalling and without the conduct of a most skilful captain. He that can seriously ascribe all this to an undisciplined and unconducted troop of atoms rambling up and down confusedly through this field of infinite space, what might he not as easily assert or admit? Certainly, he that can think so can think anything, and labour were vainly spent in further endeavour to convince him. So even pagan philosophers have judged, upon whom what impression this consideration hath made, we may learn from these words of one among them, Cicero, quote, "who," end quote, saith he, quote, "would call him a man, that beholding such certain motions of heaven, thus settled ranks of stars, all things there so connected and suited together, should deny there were a reason in them, or should affirm those things done by chance, which by no understanding we can reach with how great counsel they are performed." End quote. And, quote, "what other thing," end quote, adds he, quote, "can be so open and so perspicuous to us that shall behold the heavens and contemplate things celestial, as that there is a most excellent divinity by which these things are governed." End quote. Thus do, quote, "the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork." End quote. Yea, thus we have reason to acknowledge with Nehemiah, quote, "Thou, even thou, art the Lord alone. Thou hast made heaven, the heaven of heavens, with all their hosts, the earth and all things that are therein, the seas and all that is therein, and thou preservest them all." End quote. Thus, everything above and below us, before and behind, on this, on that, on every side of us, yields more than a simple attestation to the existence of its glorious Maker, each of them singly, several of them together, giving their vote and suffrage thereto. 3. Yea, which was the last consideration intimated, all of them joined together in one universal consort, with one harmonious voice, to proclaim one and the same wisdom to have designed, one and the same power to have produced, one and the same goodness to have set both wisdom and power on work in designing and in producing their being, in preserving and governing it. For this whole system of things, what is it? But one goodly body, as it were, compacted of several members and organs, so aptly compacted together, that each confers its being and its operations to the grace and ornament, to the strength and stability of the whole, one soul of divine providence, enlivening in a manner, and actuating it all. Survey it all over, and we shall have reason to say with the philosopher, quote, "all the parts of the world are so constituted that they could not be either better for use nor more beautiful for show." End quote. In it we shall espy nothing in substance superfluous or defective, nothing in shape deformed, in position misplaced, in motion exorbitant, so as to prejudice the beauty and welfare of the whole. We may perhaps not discern the use of each part, or the tendency of each particular effect, but of many they are so plain and palpable that reason obliges us to suppose the like of the rest, even as a person whom we observe frequently to act with great consideration and prudence, when at other times we cannot penetrate the drift of his proceedings, we must yet imagine that he hath some latent reason, some reach of policy that we are not aware of, or, as in an engine consisting of many parts, curiously combined, whereof we do perceive the general use, and apprehend how diverse parts thereof conduce thereto, reason prompts us, although we neither see them all, nor can comprehend the immediate serviceableness of some, to think they are all in some way or other subservient to the artist's design. Such an agent is God, the wisdom of whose proceedings, being in so many instances notorious, we ought to suppose it answerable in the rest. Such an engine is this world, of which we may easily enough discern the general end, and how many of its parts do conduce thereto, and cannot therefore in reason but suppose the rest in their kind alike congruous, and conducible to the same purpose. Our incapacity to discover all doth not argue any defect, but an excess of wisdom in the design thereof, not too little perfection in the work, but too great, and one rather, in respect to our capacity. However, we plainly see the result of all to be the durable continuance of things, without interruption or change, in the same constant uniform state, which shows that in the world there is no seed of corruption, as it were, no inclination to dissolution or decay, nothing that tends to the discomposure or destruction of the whole, each ingredient thereof, of those so inconceivably numerous, consists within its proper limits, not encroaching immoderately upon, not devouring or disturbing another in its course, contrary qualities therein serving to a due temperament, opposite inclinations begetting a just poise, particular vicissitudes conferring to a general settlement, private deaths and corruptions maintaining the public life and health, producing a kind of youthful vigour in the whole, so that 6,000 years together hath this great machine stood, always one and the same, unimpaired in its beauty, unworn in its parts, unwearied and undisturbed in its motions. If then, as Plutarch says, quote, no fair thing is ever produced by hazard, but with art framing it, end quote, how could this most fair comprehension of all fair things be not the lawful issue of art, but a byblow of fortune the mother only of broods monstrous and misshapen? If the nature of any cause be discoverable by its effects, if from any work we may infer the workman's ability, if in any case the results of wisdom are distinguishable from the consequences of chance, we have reason to believe that the architect of this magnificent and beautiful frame was one incomprehensibly wise, powerful, and good being. And to conclude with St. Paul, quote, the invisible things of God by the making, end quote, or rather by the make and constitution, quote, of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, end quote, so that, I adjoin after him, quote, they are inexcusable who, end quote, from hence, quote, do not know God, end quote, or, knowing him, do not render unto him his due glory and service.